My boyfriend dumped me during the anniversary trip I paid for, so I canceled his flight home and left him stranded alone. I, Claire Bennett, was 38 when I found myself sitting alone in an airport lounge, staring at a glass of whiskey that cost more than a decent dinner, while my phone buzzed nonstop with calls from the same international number. I knew exactly who was calling, and I had no intention of answering. 2 days earlier, I'd arrived at a luxury resort expecting to celebrate the happiest milestone of my life. Now I was home alone, and my boyfriend was still hundreds of miles away. The strange part was that I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. Daniel Hayes and I had been together for 10 years and lived together for almost 8. We'd built a life through holidays, career changes, family emergencies, and all the ordinary disappointments that come with a long relationship. We never married because Daniel always had another reason to wait. First it was his career, then paying off debt, then the argument that a wedding was just an expensive piece of paper. I accepted every excuse because I convinced myself commitment didn't need a ring. Still, our 10th anniversary felt different. I'd spent nearly 3 years saving for 5 nights at an all-inclusive resort with a private villa overlooking the ocean. It was extravagant, but I hoped it would help us reconnect after months of growing apart. Nothing was obviously wrong, yet everything felt off. Daniel spent more time on his phone than talking to me, turned the screen over whenever I walked into the room, and smiled at messages he dismissed as work stuff. His new job in marketing gave him a convenient explanation for the late nights and constant texting, and believing him was easier than questioning the new passcode on his phone, the private calls in the backyard, or the coworker named Rebecca, who seemed to dominate every conversation before suddenly disappearing from them altogether. The night before our flight, I found him in the kitchen just before midnight, smiling at his phone. The moment he saw me, he locked the screen. "Who's awake this late?" I asked. "Rebecca, there's a problem with the launch campaign." "Does Rebecca always send laughing emojis about launch problems?" He barely looked at me. "You're reading too much into it." The answer hurt, but I let it go because I wanted the trip to save us. For the first day, it almost worked. Daniel relaxed, swam with me, ordered drinks by the pool, took sunset photos, and held my hand on the beach. Then the cracks returned. While he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the bedside table. I didn't touch it. I only caught the preview. "I wish you were here instead." There was no name, only a heart beside the message. Daniel came back before I could decide whether to say anything. I stayed silent. That evening, I slipped into the blue dress Daniel once said made my eyes look brighter. The resort had prepared a private candlelit dinner on the beach, where warm lights swayed above us, and the waves rolled quietly onto the shore. In my handbag was a custom watch engraved with the date we first met and the words he'd whispered that night. "This feels like fate." I had no idea how bitter those words would soon become. Daniel barely touched his dinner. He kept staring toward the ocean, and for one hopeful moment, I convinced myself he was hiding a proposal. Instead, he set down his wine glass and said, "Claire, we need to talk." My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "I don't think this is working anymore." "The trip?" "Us." The word hung between us. "I've been unhappy for a while," he said. "I think we should end the relationship." I stared at him, struggling to connect the man across the table with the one whose clothes still filled half my closet. "You brought me here to break up with me?" "You brought me here." The correction was calm, but it landed like a slap. "I paid for this trip to celebrate 10 years together." "I know. And you waited until we were in another country to tell me you were leaving?" "I thought neutral ground would make it easier." "Easier for who?" "At home, everything's complicated. The house, our families. Here we could just talk." I almost laughed. He'd let me pay for the villa, the flights, and the romantic dinner so he could have a cleaner exit. "How long have you known?" He hesitated. "A few months." "So you knew before this trip?" "I didn't know how to tell you." "So you decided to enjoy one last vacation first." I hoped we could have a few good days. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. While I'd been planning our anniversary, he'd been planning our ending. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Is there someone else?" He lowered his eyes. Yes." "Who?" "Rebecca." Every late-night message, every locked screen, every excuse suddenly made sense. "How long?" "A few months." While I'd been saving for this trip, he'd been building another relationship. "Does she know you're here with me?" "She knows things between us are complicated." "So she doesn't know." He stayed silent. "Does she know I paid for this anniversary trip?" "That isn't important." "It is to me." He leaned back with a sigh. "I didn't want to humiliate you." I looked at him in disbelief. "You brought me to another country, let me plan a romantic anniversary dinner, then told me you were leaving me for your coworker. How exactly did you think that protected my dignity?" "I'm trying to be honest." "No, you're being honest after every decision has already been made." For the first time, annoyance crossed his face. "I knew you'd react like this." The tears disappeared. In that moment, I understood everything. He expected me to cry, beg, stay for the rest of the vacation, fly home with him, let him move back into my house, and help him ease into his new life. Even after ending our relationship, he still expected me to make things easier for him. I touched the unopened watch in my handbag, then let it go. If you've decided it's over, I said quietly, then it's over. We don't have to make every decision tonight. You already did. I mean the practical ones. Those are my decisions now. I stood. Claire, sit down. No. We should finish this. You finished it when you said her name. I walked away. By the time I reached the villa, I already knew he wasn't coming after me. Back at the villa, I packed in silence, then opened my laptop. Our return flights were booked through my airline account and paid for with my credit card. 2 names appeared on the reservation. Claire Bennett, Daniel Hayes. Beside his name was a single option. Cancel passenger. My finger hovered over the trackpad. For 10 years, Daniel had relied on me to make his life easier. That night, for the first time, I chose not to. For a moment, I imagined doing what I always had, pretending nothing had happened, finishing the vacation, flying home together, and living beside a man who had already chosen someone else. I clicked. Cancel passenger. A confirmation window appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this passenger's return ticket? Yes. Seconds later, the confirmation email arrived. Daniel Hayes no longer had a return flight. I closed my laptop and finally felt something stronger than heartbreak. It wasn't revenge or satisfaction. It was the realization that, for the first time in years, I was making a decision for myself instead of cleaning up Daniel's life. As I grabbed my suitcase, I noticed the velvet gift box on the dresser. Inside was the silver watch engraved with the words, "This feels like fate." I let out a quiet laugh. I guess fate has a strange sense of humor. I slipped it back into my bag. Daniel would never wear it. The lobby was nearly empty when I checked out. I need to leave tonight, I told the receptionist. After confirming the reservation, he called the duty manager, Victor. I've already paid for everything up to this point, I explained, but my boyfriend is staying behind. Any charges after I leave need to go directly to him. Victor glanced at the reservation. It's all under your account. I know, that's why I need it changed. He nodded. We can remove your payment authorization for all future charges. Mr. Hayes will need to provide his own card before using any additional services. That's exactly what I want. Victor updated the reservation, removed my payment authorization, and handed me the paperwork to sign. From that moment on, every additional expense would require Daniel's own payment method. Deep down, I already knew it wouldn't. The airport shuttle arrived 20 minutes later. As I climbed aboard, I looked back at the glowing villas one last time. Somewhere inside was the man I'd loved for 10 years. I checked my phone before the shuttle left. There wasn't a single missed call. Daniel either hadn't noticed I was gone, or he'd chosen to finish dinner first. As the shuttle disappeared into the night, the tears finally came, not because Daniel had chosen Rebecca, but because I realized he'd stopped choosing me long before he admitted it. The airport was nearly empty by 3 in the morning. Checking any bags? The airline clerk asked. Just this. Heading home early? My vacation ended sooner than expected. She offered a sympathetic smile. I'm sorry. So am I. 40 minutes later, I settled into my seat just as my phone lit up. Daniel, where are you? Reception says you checked out. Claire, answer me. Then another. This isn't funny. Even then, that was the word he chose. I replied with 4 words. We're finished. Goodbye. Then I blocked his number, switched off my phone, and boarded the flight. For the first time in years, Daniel had no way to reach me. Nearly 15 hours later, I landed home. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, but walking through the front door felt completely different. The moment I turned my phone back on, notifications flooded the screen. The first messages were irritated. Claire, stop being childish. Call me. We need to figure this out. Then they turned confused. Reception says my ticket doesn't exist anymore. Did you cancel it? Then angry. You had no right to do this. Answer your phone. Finally panic. My card isn't working. Claire, please pick up. I'll fix everything. The last voicemail wasn't from Daniel. Good afternoon, Ms. Bennett. My name is Marcus, security manager at Azure Cove Resort. He explained that Daniel had listed me as his emergency contact and was disputing thousands of dollars in charges made after I'd checked out. Our records show you removed your payment authorization before leaving, Marcus said. Can you confirm you aren't accepting responsibility for any expenses incurred afterward? Correct. Another voicemail downloaded immediately afterward. Daniel sounded nothing like the confident man who had ended our relationship. What the hell were you thinking? You canceled my flight. They froze my room charges. I can't pay for anything. His voice cracked. Claire, I just need you to fix this. I'll pay you back, please. I deleted the message. He wasn't apologizing for cheating. He wasn't apologizing for ending a 10-year relationship over dinner. He was apologizing because for the first time I wasn't rescuing him. Later that afternoon, Marcus called again. I wanted to update you, he said. Mr. Hayes continued ordering premium services after your departure. What kind? Private spa treatments, premium wine packages, multiple in-room dining orders, and a private charter excursion. I stared at the wall. He knew there was a payment problem? Yes. Staff informed him several times that he'd need a valid payment method before any additional purchases. And he kept ordering? He insisted the situation would be resolved. Of course he had. Daniel hadn't expected the resort to cover the bill. He'd expected me to. When his personal cards were declined, Marcus continued, he became increasingly frustrated. His parents and sister have now been contacted. Less than an hour later, another voicemail arrived. Claire, this is Natalie. You've completely lost your mind. My brother is stranded because of you. If anything happens to him, that's on you. I deleted it without listening twice. That evening, Marcus called one final time. Mr. Hayes' family transferred nearly $8,000 to settle the outstanding balance. So it's finished? Financially, yes. He hesitated. I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen couples separate, engagements end, and ugly arguments. But I've never seen someone keep spending after being told, repeatedly, that the person paying had already left. Neither had I. Before hanging up, he added, Mr. Hayes checked out this morning. His flight arrives tomorrow evening. The next night, just before 11, my security camera sent an alert. Someone was pounding on my front door. I opened the live feed. Daniel stood on my front porch, trying his key again and again, as if the lock had suddenly turned against him. When it refused to budge a third time, he looked up at the security camera. He knew I was watching. He pounded on the door. Claire, I know you're in there. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood behind the living room curtains and watched. For 10 years, Daniel had walked through that front door without giving it a second thought. What he'd never fully understood was that the house had always been mine. I bought it 2 years before we met, paid every mortgage payment, tax bill, insurance premium, repair, and renovation myself. Daniel helped with groceries, vacations, and daily expenses, but ownership had never belonged to him. I'd simply made him feel like it did. Another knock shook the door. I finally switched on the intercom. What do you want? Relief flashed across Daniel's face. Please open the door. No. Natalie stepped toward the camera. Don't do this. I already did. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. I've had the worst week of my life. I can imagine. You stranded me. No, I left after you ended our relationship. You canceled my flight. Yes, you left me there. You chose to end a 10-year relationship in another country. I chose to go home. He lowered his voice. We shouldn't be doing this outside. I almost smiled. You were the one who wanted neutral ground. His expression fell. He remembered saying it. Natalie folded her arms. This is childish. No, I said calmly. What's childish is expecting to cheat on someone, end the relationship, and still walk back into her house like nothing happened. Daniel spoke before Natalie could. Our house. My house. The correction hung in the air. It never stopped being mine. His shoulders slumped. I just need to come inside so we can talk. We already talked. No. No, you listened. Exactly. He rested a hand against the door. I handled everything badly. You handled it exactly the way you planned. I made a mistake. I didn't hesitate. Was Rebecca the mistake? He froze. No. Then what was? He couldn't answer. Natalie tried again. Daniel hasn't slept. He barely ate. Neither had I said. The difference was that my situation wasn't one I'd created myself. His clothes are inside, she said. His laptop, his documents. I know. So let him get them. He will. When? When my attorney arranges a property pickup. Daniel stared at the camera. Attorney? Yes. You actually hired a lawyer? I did. The color drained from his face. Until that moment, he still believed this would end the way every argument had ended before. He thought I'd cry, forgive him, and eventually make everything easier. For the first time in 10 years, he realized I wasn't going to save him. Daniel stared at the speaker. Claire, you don't need a lawyer. I think I do. We're not enemies. I almost laughed. No? You cheated on me, ended our relationship during the anniversary trip I paid for, expected me to deal with every practical consequence after you left, then called me because your own plans fell apart. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I've already packed your belongings, I continued. Everything has been inventoried. My attorney will arrange a pickup once the lawyers agree on a date. Natalie's eyes widened. You packed everything? Yes. You went through his things? No, I packed them. Those aren't the same thing. Daniel looked genuinely shaken. You packed my whole life into boxes. You packed ours into one conversation. Silence settled between us. Finally, he spoke. I don't want this to end. That wasn't the sentence I expected. What? I've been thinking. Everything happened too fast. I shook my head. No, it happened over months. You just finally said it out loud. I don't know what I want anymore. That was all I needed to hear. That answer told me everything I needed to know. I asked one question. If Rebecca called right now and asked you to come to her, would you go? He said nothing. 3 seconds of silence told me everything. I nodded. Thank you. For what? For answering? I didn't answer. You didn't have to. Natalie tugged on his arm. Daniel, let's go. He stayed where he was. I love you. The words felt hollow. Not because he'd never loved me, but because he'd chosen someone else before saying them. You loved me enough to replace me before you left, I said. Those aren't the same thing. His eyes filled with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. You just decided hurting me was acceptable. He flinched. When can I get my things? He asked quietly. My lawyer will contact yours. I don't have a lawyer. You will. Natalie finally led him back to the car. I waited until they drove away before opening the door. The porch was empty, except for the old garage remote Daniel had dropped. For years, that little piece of plastic had represented a home we supposedly shared. Now it was just another thing he'd left behind. I picked it up, walked inside, and locked the door. The next morning was quiet until my phone started buzzing. The messages weren't from Daniel. They were from mutual friends. Are you two really over? Daniel said you abandoned him overseas. He said you canceled everything out of spite. People are worried about him. By lunchtime, it was obvious Daniel hadn't just told people we'd broken up. He'd rewritten the entire story. According to him, I'd become unstable after he asked for space, secretly canceled his flight, stranded him in another country, threw him out of the house, and refused to return his belongings. There was no affair, no Rebecca, no anniversary dinner, no breakup, only my reaction. I didn't answer a single message. Instead, I started saving everything. Texts, voicemails, emails, screenshots. If this became a legal fight, I wanted a complete record. That evening, my manager Linda called. Claire, do you have a minute? The concern in her voice immediately put me on edge. Of course. I wanted you to hear this from me before HR contacts you. My stomach dropped. This morning, someone submitted an anonymous complaint. They claim you're emotionally unstable after abandoning your partner overseas and questioned whether you're fit to manage clients. I closed my eyes. It wasn't a coincidence. I've worked with you for 8 years, Linda said. I don't believe any of it, but HR still has to document the complaint. I understand. Can you tell me what really happened? I took a deep breath and told her everything, from the dinner on the beach to Daniel showing up at my front door. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Get a lawyer. I already have one." Good, because whoever sent that complaint isn't finished yet. She was right. Neither was I. The anonymous complaint reached Human Resources on Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, Daniel's version of the breakup had already spread through our circle of friends. According to him, I'd lost control after he ended the relationship, canceled his flight out of spite, locked him out of the house without warning, and refused to return his belongings. One detail never appeared in any version of the story. Rebecca, the woman he'd left me for, simply vanished from the narrative. So did the anniversary trip I'd paid for, the beachside dinner where he'd ended a 10-year relationship, and his admission that he'd been seeing Rebecca for months. Instead, he became the abandoned victim, and I became the unstable ex-girlfriend. For a while, I considered defending myself. Then I stopped. Anyone willing to believe his story without asking a single question probably wasn't interested in the truth. Instead of arguing, I started building a file. Every voicemail, every text, every airline confirmation, every receipt, every email from the resort, every conversation with Marcus. By the time I met attorney Evelyn Albright 2 days later, everything was organized chronologically. She spent nearly an hour reading without interruption, making only a few notes before finally looking up. Mr. Hayes made a mistake. You mean cheating? No, she said calmly. A legal mistake. She slid several documents across the table. He assumed emotions would matter more than paperwork. The first stack was the deed to my house. The second contained years of mortgage statements, followed by insurance records, property taxes, utility bills, and maintenance invoices. Every payment had come from my personal account. He lived there? She asked. Yes. Shared groceries and household expenses? Yes. But the mortgage? Always mine. The title? Only mine. She nodded. Then he has no ownership interest whatsoever. The tension I'd been carrying eased slightly. So this should be over. Ms. Albright gave a small, knowing smile. I wouldn't count on it. People who feel entitled rarely stop just because the law isn't on their side. She was right. 3 days later, Daniel hired his own attorney. The first letter from Daniel's attorney arrived by certified mail. It wasn't an apology or a request to collect his belongings. It was a demand for money. Daniel claimed he'd spent nearly 8 years helping maintain the household and therefore deserved compensation for his reasonable expectation of shared property. He also sought reimbursement for relocation expenses, temporary housing, emotional distress, and the financial hardship he claimed I'd caused by canceling his flight and locking him out. I read the letter twice before handing it to Evelyn Albright. She barely reacted. I've seen worse. He can't actually believe this. Oh, he does. She uncapped her pen and crossed out nearly half the claims within minutes. Most of this won't survive basic legal scrutiny. And the rest? We'll dismantle it, one document at a time. Over the following weeks, my life settled into a routine of work, dinner, legal paperwork, and sleep. We reviewed years of financial records, mortgage statements, taxes, insurance, repair invoices, contractor payments, even receipts from replacing the roof. Daniel insisted he'd help build the house. He had painted a guest room, planted flowers, and assembled patio furniture, but every significant expense had come from my account. The paperwork left little room for argument. Daniel, meanwhile, kept telling his version of the story. A few mutual friends quietly disappeared. Others unfollowed me. One even messaged, "I thought you were kinder than this." I deleted it. Anyone who wanted the truth would eventually ask for it. About a month later, Melissa called. I wasn't going to say anything when we came, but I ran into Rebecca. What happened? I mentioned your anniversary trip. She hesitated. Claire, she looked completely confused. What do you mean? She said she thought Daniel canceled that vacation because of work. I sat in silence. If Melissa was right, Daniel hadn't only lied to me. He'd lied to Rebecca too. He'd been living 2 different stories at the same time. I immediately sent Melissa's written statement to Ms. Albright. She called within the hour. Interesting. Is that good? It establishes a pattern. What pattern? He tells different versions of the same story depending on who's listening. A few days later, another piece fell into place. Our investigator couldn't trace the anonymous HR complaint, but Evelyn noticed something else. She laid 2 documents side by side. The complaint described me as emotionally unstable, financially controlling, and accused me of abandoning someone vulnerable overseas. Next to it were old text messages from Natalie. Sometimes I think you are emotionally unstable. You use money to control people. Daniel is vulnerable right now. The wording was almost identical. You think Natalie wrote it? I asked. I think someone copied her language. Can you prove it? Not yet. She smiled. But people who keep lying usually leave more evidence. Soon afterward, Daniel's attorney requested mediation. We accepted immediately. Why? I asked. Because Mr. Hayes believes his own version of events, Evelyn replied. People like that eventually contradict themselves. The mediation lasted nearly 3 hours. Daniel looked exhausted, but the moment he saw me, he offered a hopeful smile. Claire, I never wanted any of this. You should have thought about that before ending our relationship over dinner. Most of the session focused on financial records. Daniel insisted he'd invested years into our shared life and argued I should have given him more time to transition. Then Evelyn asked 3 simple questions. When you ended the relationship at the resort, were you already romantically involved with Rebecca Cole? Daniel's attorney objected, but the mediator allowed the question. Yes. Were you planning to continue that relationship immediately afterward? Did Ms. Bennett know any of this before paying for the anniversary vacation? Silence. No. Evelyn closed her notebook. She didn't need another question. Daniel had just admitted, on the record, that he'd accepted an anniversary trip funded by the woman he intended to leave while already involved with someone else. Even his own attorney looked unsettled. As we gathered our files, Evelyn leaned toward me. Next, we're talking to Rebecca. You think she'll cooperate? I think she knows far more than Mr. Hayes wants anyone to hear. Across the room, Daniel heard Rebecca's name. His head snapped toward us. For the first time since all this began, he looked genuinely afraid. Rebecca agreed to testify. No one expected that. Daniel least of all. His attorney immediately asked to postpone the meeting, arguing Rebecca had nothing to do with the property dispute. Evelyn remained calm. Mr. Hayes has repeatedly claimed his relationship with Ms. Cole had no connection to his financial expectations after ending a 10-year partnership. We're simply testing that claim. The request was denied. 3 days later, Rebecca entered the conference room with her attorney. She wasn't the confident, glamorous woman I'd imagined during countless sleepless nights. She just looked tired. When our eyes met, she quietly said, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Neither of us smiled. Rebecca answered every question without hesitation. She admitted she and Daniel had grown close months earlier, gone to dinner together, shared hotel rooms during work conferences, and crossed boundaries that never should have been crossed. Then Evelyn asked, "What did Mr. Hayes tell you about his relationship with Miss Bennett?" He said they'd already separated emotionally. Did he tell you they were celebrating their anniversary together? Rebecca frowned. No. Did you know they were taking a 5-night anniversary vacation? Her expression changed instantly. No. Silence filled the room. Rebecca slowly turned toward Daniel. You told me that trip was canceled. He stared at the table. You said work got in the way. Still nothing. You were there with her the entire time? I was trying to end things, he muttered. Rebecca let out a short, disbelieving laugh. So while you were telling me you couldn't travel because of work, you were staying in a private villa with Claire? He had no answer. I actually defended you, she said, shaking her head. Daniel's attorney tried to interrupt, but Rebecca cut him off. No, I'd like to finish. She looked back at Evelyn. Daniel told me Claire already knew the relationship was over. He said they were only living together until they sorted out their finances. I closed my eyes. Every lie he'd told me had another version waiting for someone else. Evelyn slid another document across the table. Did Mr. Hayes ever discuss what would happen financially after leaving Miss Bennett? Yes. What did he say? He wasn't worried. Why? Rebecca hesitated only briefly. He said Claire always took care of everything. Daniel finally looked up. Rebecca. She ignored him. He said Claire would never throw him out. He expected she'd help him get settled somewhere else, and joked she'd calm down after a few weeks. Suddenly, years of small moments made sense. Every forgotten bill, every emergency, every promise to pay me back later had always ended the same way. It wasn't carelessness. It was confidence that I'd always absorb the consequences. Rebecca looked directly at Daniel. He expected things to be awkward, she said, but never difficult. Evelyn asked one final question. What made him so confident? Rebecca didn't hesitate. He said, Claire never lets me fail. That hurt more than the affair. Somewhere over 10 years together, I'd unknowingly taught Daniel that no matter what he did, I'd always be there to protect him from the consequences. He believed I'd save him one more time. He was wrong. The questioning continued. Did Mr. Hayes ever talk about receiving money after the breakup? Rebecca nodded. He expected part of the house. Daniel immediately interrupted. I never said that. Rebecca turned to him without hesitation. Yes, you did. She paused for a moment before repeating his exact words. I've invested enough years that I'm not walking away empty-handed. Silence settled over the room. Daniel's attorney removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He didn't even try to argue. Then Rebecca looked toward the mediator. May I ask Claire something? He nodded. Did you really pay for the anniversary trip? Yes. The flights? Yes. The villa? Yes. The private dinner? Yes. So, everything? Everything. Rebecca covered her mouth. Oh my God. She turned slowly toward Daniel. You let her pay for all of it? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Her voice hardened. You told me you were paying. Daniel said nothing. You lied to both of us. You told me Claire already knew the relationship was over, and you let her believe you still had a future together. She shook her head. I honestly don't know which version of you was real. Without waiting for an answer, she stood. I've said everything I came here to say. Before leaving, she looked back at me. I truly am sorry. It was the last time I ever saw her. After Rebecca's testimony, Evelyn requested additional records from the resort. Marcus, the security manager, provided a complete incident log, documenting every premium purchase Daniel made after I left, every warning from staff, every declined credit card, and every argument at the front desk. One note stood out. 2:17 p.m. Guest stated, just charge it. She always pays eventually. Marcus also included a transcript from the lobby security footage. For nearly 20 minutes, Daniel argued with the receptionist, insisting, my girlfriend's just overreacting. She'll authorize everything once she cools off. Reading those words, I finally understood. Daniel had never expected to pay the bill himself. Weeks later, Daniel's attorney returned with a very different proposal. Instead of demanding money or a share of my house, he offered a clean settlement. Each of us would keep our own property, cover our own legal fees, and walk away. Evelyn read the proposal once and smiled. They finally understand how weak their case has become. She tapped the file. If this goes to trial, Rebecca's testimony hurts them. Marcus's reports hurt them even more. And if we connect the anonymous HR complaint to Daniel or Natalie, their credibility collapses. A few days later, Daniel asked to meet in person. He said he wanted to apologize without involving the lawyers. Evelyn didn't hesitate. He had months to apologize. I know. So why now? I thought about Rebecca's testimony, the failed settlement, and the mountain of evidence stacked against him. He needs something. Exactly. I looked out the window. What if I still want to hear him? She considered it for a moment. Then you won't meet him alone. The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at my house. Evelyn would be there, along with an off-duty police officer, while Daniel collected the last of his belongings. After I hung up, I looked around the living room that had once felt empty whenever Daniel traveled. Now it felt peaceful. The pain hadn't disappeared, but the uncertainty had. Daniel hadn't lost me because I abandoned him. He lost me the moment he believed I'd always protect him from the consequences of his own choices. All that remained was saying goodbye one last time. Friday morning arrived with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Daniel's belongings had been packed for weeks. Every box was labeled, photographed, and inventoried at Evelyn's recommendation. Nothing was damaged or missing. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just wanted this chapter to end. At exactly 9, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera before opening the door. Daniel stood outside in jeans and a navy sweater hanging loosely from his thinner frame. The man who had confidently ended our relationship on the beach looked exhausted. Natalie waited beside her SUV, while the off-duty police officer stood quietly near the sidewalk, exactly as planned. Inside, Evelyn sat at my dining table with the inventory folder already open. Everything about the morning was professional, and that was intentional. I opened the door halfway. Good morning. Morning. The silence lingered until Evelyn broke it. Mr. Hayes, you may begin collecting your property. Daniel stepped inside and paused, taking in the house. Daniel paused just inside the doorway, quietly taking in a house that no longer felt like his. Not because I wanted to erase the past, because I couldn't keep decorating my future with it. You redecorated, he said quietly. A little. It looks nice. Thank you. It was the most ordinary conversation we'd had in months. The collection took nearly 2 hours. Daniel checked each box against the inventory before signing the receipt. Everything he owned was exactly where it was supposed to be. Evelyn asked him to sign each page confirming receipt. He signed without argument. Months ago, he'd threatened lawsuits over almost everything. Now, he simply accepted what was in front of him. Reality had finally caught up with him. As he sealed another box, he looked at me. Can I ask you something? What? Did you ever open my anniversary present? I frowned. What present? The one you bought. I walked to the hallway cabinet and returned with the small velvet box. I never gave it to you. His expression softened. You kept it. I placed it on the table. Go ahead. He opened the lid. The silver watch caught the light. Slowly, he turned it over and read the engraving aloud. This feels like fate. A long silence followed. I remember saying that. I know. I meant it. I believe you did. His eyes filled. I'm sorry. This time the apology sounded different. No excuses. No bargaining. Just regret. I should have told you the truth sooner. Yes. I should never have accepted this trip. You should never have started another relationship while letting me pay for it. He closed his eyes and nodded. I know. I kept waiting for the right time. There wasn't one. I know. He gently closed the box. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. I slid the box back toward myself. I'm selling it. He looked at me, then gave a small nod. You should. It was never meant for someone who'd already decided to leave. For the first time that morning, he didn't try to defend himself. I understand. Once the last box was loaded into Natalie's SUV, only one document remained. The settlement agreement. Daniel sat across from Evelyn as she reviewed each clause. Daniel signed each section of the settlement agreement in silence. By the time he reached the final page, there was nothing left to argue about. It was over. 10 years together. 6 months of legal battles. Hundreds of pages of evidence. Reduced to a few signatures. Evelyn gathered the paperwork. I'll file this afternoon. The officer stepped outside, leaving Daniel and me alone for the first time since the beach. He broke the silence. Rebecca left. I know. About 3 months ago, she found out I'd lied to her. I nodded. I'm sorry for everyone involved. He gave a tired smile. You've always been kinder than I deserved. Neither of us spoke for a moment. I kept thinking, he said quietly, if you let me come home that first night, maybe things would have turned out differently. I met his eyes. No, it only would have taken longer. He lowered his head. I thought you'd eventually forgive me. I shook my head. No, you thought I'd rescue you. He looked confused. When your cards were declined, when the resort demanded payment, when you couldn't get back into this house, even after you filed that lawsuit, you always believed I'd step in and fix everything. His expression slowly collapsed. I guess I did. You weren't shocked that I left, I said. You were shocked because for the first time I stopped protecting you. He lowered his eyes. I never saw it that way. I know. And that's why there's nothing left to fix. Natalie honked from the driveway. Daniel picked up the last box, then paused at the door. I hope you find someone better than me. I held his gaze. I hope you become someone better than the man who walked away from me on that beach. He gave a small nod before walking to the SUV. I watched him drive away, then quietly close the front door, not to lock him out, but because that part of my life was finally over. After that, life slowly settled. Rebecca ended the relationship almost as soon as she learned the truth, and her marriage didn't survive the affair. Daniel eventually left his marketing job after months of office gossip and took a lower-paying position nearly an hour outside the city. Natalie never contacted me again after receiving a formal legal warning over the anonymous HR complaint. Whether she wrote it herself or simply encouraged someone else eventually stopped mattering. As the lawsuit faded into the past, so did most of the rumors. Some friendships disappeared with them, while a few people eventually apologized. Recovery wasn't marked by one dramatic moment. It happened through ordinary routines. I repainted the guest room, replaced furniture we'd chosen together, returned to hiking on weekends, started therapy every other Thursday, and filled the house with meals Daniel had never wanted to eat. Little by little, it stopped feeling like the place we had shared and became my home again. A month later, I sold the anniversary watch. It belonged to a future that never happened, and I was finally ready to let it go. As I closed the front door behind me that evening, I realized the life I'd spent years trying to protect was already behind me. Whatever came next belonged entirely to me.